Thank you everybody for coming tonight, and I hope to be able to entertain you something for a few minutes here at least. Couple of questions. What's a tiny house? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
You want to do this? This one.
Does that work?
Yeah, this one is fine.
Cargo container with furniture.
Okay.
A residence under 400 square feet.
Ah, okay. Anybody else? All right. What should a tiny house cost? 100,000? Okay. It depends on the finish. Anybody else want to take a stab at a number? How much you're willing to pay? 35,000? Yeah. Yeah, that'd probably get you started buying the materials. Yeah, probably. Okay. Well, we're going to try to answer some of those questions tonight. So let's see if Wendy's clicker will work here. Oh, did I turn it off? What is a tiny house? So let's talk a little bit about what a tiny house is. So I put several categories up here. 400 square foot or less. There's no definition, right? It's kind of all over the map. The reason we use 400 square foot is there's kind of a 10 foot by 40 that you can put on a trailer and pull it down the road without having to have those pilot cars in the front and the back with the flags that you've got a wide load. You may also hear of a 10 by 40 or 400 square foot house being called a park model. That's the reason it caps at 400, if you ever wondered 10 by 40. It can be on wheels. What do we call a T-house, a tiny house on wheels, or it can be on foundation, which in my opinion, and by the way, my background is 33 years as an investor and involvement in commercial real estate and commercial real estate finance, and I've been in the tiny home world for the last 3 years. Doesn't make me an expert, but I've been in it a lot longer than most people have. So I call it modern modular. Some people call it a T-hoff, tiny house on foundation, okay? Doesn't matter. The homes can be certified or they can be uncertified. Uncertified would be a do-it-yourselfer. Somebody who, maybe they're a builder and they built it in their shop or in their backyard. Let's talk briefly about what it takes to get certification, because if somebody tells you they've got certification, I want you to be aware of that. To get certified, you have to certify the factory and you have to certify the model. And to get certified, you got to make 10 of them. Okay? So this isn't the person who's doing 2 or 3 a year. They're not going to get certification. So the certifications on a house with wheels falls under what's called ANSI 119.5. I'm hitting you with a lot of acronyms here. ANSI stands for American National Standards Institute. 119.5 is the section, and that's for houses with wheels, which also covers RVs. Okay, it's the very best we've got to build houses to with wheels. We keep petitioning standards organizations to give us certification criteria for tiny houses, but this is all we have now. Okay. The reason that's important with certification: easier to get insurance, easier to get financing, and higher resale value. Okay. Do-it-yourself units, you're kind of on your own. Okay. Modulars are certified. So by the way, the ANSI certification for houses on wheels is good in all 50 states. Modular certification is state by state. Here in Texas, it's regulated by TDLR, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Okay, let's move on. Oh, it worked. So demographics. Oh, that slide got messed up. Recreational, residential, and retirement. So big, broad spectrum of what you can use tiny houses for. As investors, if you're thinking about using tiny houses in your investment strategy, you can do all three. Works. Market stats. I just threw some statistics up here that you may or may not be familiar with. you know, for the longest time, I thought this is millennials and baby boomers that were most interested in this. I can tell you, I'm talking to 5 different tiny home developments here in Austin. And anybody have a guess on what the predominant person demographic is on their wait list?
Young professionals.
Not millennials.
Retirees.
No.
Gen X.
What's left? Gen Y.
44-year-old single female with a cat. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just giving you the information.
So what's that,
Okay.
Gen FC?
Okay. A nurse, you know, professional, might be an accountant, bookkeeper. I mean, you know, has the money to buy, just doesn't have the money to buy in Austin. Well, let's keep going.
So that's a local statistic or a local?
Yeah, so that is me, right? And that is me talking to 5 different developments, one in Georgetown, one in Lockhart, one in South Austin, one in Kyle, and one out on Decker Lane, and talking to the sales managers and saying, hey, you know, who's on the list? What are you seeing? Okay. But it is broad spectrum. Okay. Commercial uses of tiny homes.
When people move in, do you offer like a free litter box with every purchase?
Should.
Yeah.
Hey, we should do one of those like automated litter boxes. You know, it has like when the cow walks up, the door raises. Right? Yeah. We're all about features, right? In tiny homes. So this is a long list, and I want to spend the kind of the majority of the time on this one. So let's see. I think this thing has a. Does it have a pointer?
No.
Oh, yeah, it does. Ah, look at that. So, again, this is from me. You're not going to find this in a book. This just comes from my 3 years of experience in the industry, is to the predominant categories that I see people asking about utilizing tiny homes, right? So, tiny home resort, right? Lake, river, vacation, destination, usually 20 plus units, okay? Could be owned by individual investors in a timeshare, or could be owned by the developer. So let's talk through that. So imagine a piece of property maybe up in Spicewood, Texas, right? Up on Lake Travis. There's one up there actually already called Living Waters. You may have heard of it. It's got some tiny homes and a hay bale house on it. Okay, so it's got a dock, and it's set up for yoga retreats and naturopathic retreats and all kinds of stuff goes on up there. Weddings, all right? But imagine that in a larger context where there's 100 to 400 homes, the developer goes in and does the horizontal infrastructure and sells each one of those homes to investors. You buy one, you want to use it at spring break for a week, you want to use it in the summer for 2 weeks, and in the fall or during Christmas, but the rest of the time it's in a pool that the operating company is running for you. They turn it, it's on Airbnb, it's on their private platform, and so you're actually getting a check every month. So that is a large scale development. Okay. So what did I do?
I think this turned on.
Did that one turn off? Uh-oh. We'll get it back on. So the second category I'll talk to you here about is 5 to 20 units. Think about, you've been out to Driftwood or Wimberley lately, or High Texas, Fredericksburg, wineries, right? What about breweries? Twisted X, okay? So if they already own land, how hard is it to go put 5 tiny homes there, have their clientele or their members in their wine club stay overnight, right? What about farm to table dinners? Rent your tiny home, get a golf cart as well, right, to use for the weekend. So that's the smaller 5 to 20 unit model. That's typically owned by the venue. There's also some D6 Retreat. Have you heard of that one in Dripping Springs? The 5 tiny homes at a wedding venue, it's booked every weekend. Okay. And you know what the wedding venue is? It's a tent. It's a tent. It's got a beautiful sunset view, but it's a tent. And they're grossing over $3,500 a weekend. Okay. Back to the list. A tiny home hive. I gave this name. You know, I was meeting with somebody. If you know, there's a big corporation that does 55 plus adult communities, and apparently saying retirement communities is like very frowned upon, right? It makes people feel old. So I call it the tiny home hive. But one of the things that we're seeing is, for example, there's a development going up in, it's not just tiny homes out in Elgin, Texas, around a organic farm, an agrarian community, right? With homes starting at 600 square feet, right? A lot of demand. And of course, you're right, the demand for that particular product is baby boomers, right? Tiny home public-private partnerships. We don't have enough time to get into the parts of this. My colleague Alan just joined us. That's one of his specialty areas. But this is where a developer and a manufacturer would partner with a city or the county where there's really a shortage of homes, like in, you know, Taylor or Manor or Bastrop, where the Economic Development Corporation would have land and say, look, why don't we do a land lease and you put some houses here and we'll do a public-private partnership. Because we need some housing. You know, we have 130 teachers that weren't able to even live in the city because they couldn't find a place that they could live. Okay. Tiny house ADU for rent. You know, Wendy just did there was a program in the same room just a month ago about ADUs, and if you don't know what an ADU is, it's an accessory dwelling unit or granny flat. Is if you can put a house in your backyard and rent it out. So if you've got rental property, you know, that may be a good opportunity for you. And I don't see Ken here, but there's a company called All Abode who helps you figure out what you can put in your backyard. It's a great tool. allabode.org. So, tiny home village. So the last two here, one's a tiny home village and one's a tiny home community. Let me explain the difference. So a tiny home village is similar to the RV park or mobile home park model, where you're renting the land but you own the house. So what we're seeing, like in this development in South Austin, they've come in, they're putting in the horizontal infrastructure, they're gonna do 99-year transferable lot leases on all the lots. And you're like, 99 years, wow, I don't think I'll make it that long. I wouldn't. But it's transferable, and it creates what's called a leasehold estate. Because the development's gotten Fannie Mae approval, you can get a 15-year or 30-year mortgage on that $100,000 house. It's on foundation and it's attached, right? It could be moved, but you're never gonna move it, because when the development sells out, you call up your realtor, Wendy's team, and list it, and you'll get whatever the market is, right? And it's gonna be a lot, if things go the way they're going, it'll be more than what you paid for it, right? The next one, tiny house community. The difference here is the developer of the project is bringing in tiny homes on foundations, attaching that, and selling the lot fee simple. Now, in these scenarios, for those mortgages, it has to be over 400 square feet. Because there's a lot of confusion as to whether Fannie Mae has a minimum square footage. It depends on who you call there. But what we've learned through experience is you better be at 401 square feet or more, because otherwise you got a problem. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Costs. So this is what investors want to know. What's it cost? What's it cost to do these things? Well, we don't have time to go over a pro forma, but obviously calculate your land cost. Horizontal development, all I can tell you is I've seen in the past $20 to $40 per pad. Okay. I know that's a big swing, but it just depends. Depends on the property, depends on where it is. Yeah. You cannot do these in the city of Austin, by the way. You've got to be in the ETJ or the county. Now, Code Next may change that, but we're waiting, right? Tiny home costs, certified units. You know, what I tell most investors, put $80,000 to $100,000 in there in your pro forma. If it pencils out, then it's time to start doing feasibility, right? Yeah. If the math works at $80,000 to $100,000, then it deserves a further conversation. If it doesn't, you need to look at another option. Okay. Don't forget delivery and installation costs. It varies. I usually tell folks to plug in about $5,000 in there. Probably a good ballpark number. And then when you start looking at rents, work with your realtor and look at what rents are going for. I can tell you in Central Texas, lot rentals for these types of developments are going from $400 to $1,200 a month. I lived in a 300 square foot unit on Barton Springs Road, not a tiny because it wouldn't allow it. And my rent in 2010 when I moved in was $425, and the rent when I moved out 6 months ago was $1,200.
The lot size would include parking?
Yes. Now, I can tell you on these developments, depending on the developer, a lot of them are putting in a single parking space, and then they're renting an additional parking space. They're also partnering with transit authorities. They're bringing in car-to-goes, putting in car-to-go parking spaces, really encouraging people to do other than just having more cars. But when I was paying there in Pecan Grove, I had 3 off-street parking places, a storage building, and my lot, so I still paid the $1,200 to be downtown. Right? Okay. And the reason this is appealing and why many investors are looking for old RV parks and mobile home parks to reposition them with this product, can you imagine doing long-term leases with stable tenants with these kinds of rents, right? Your cap rates look really good. Karen?
So as part of that cost, the utilities, like when you're putting something like in Spicewoods, you're looking at well and septics, or how does that figure into those costs?
Well, that's in the horizontal development cost. So when I look at that 20 to 40,000, if you're out there and you're having to put in a commercial septic system, it's going to be closer to 40, right? Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So your horizontal development costs, water, wastewater, electric, and telco. Those are your 4, right? And usually the biggest problem is wastewater. The second challenge is water. Electric and telco are easy. Right? So financing for tiny homes. I feel like I'm ignoring this side of the room. Tiny homes on wheels are treated like RVs. There's a federal law on the books that many people don't know about and is rarely enforced. It says that you can only live in a house on wheels for 6 months in any year. So imagine all those people like me that were living for 7 years or more, 20 years, some of them in Pecan Grove. you're in a zoned RV park. You think the city of Austin's gonna come down there and ask you if you know, and the question is, oh, well, I went on vacation for a week. I didn't live in here for more than 6 months at one time, right? So you don't have to worry about it really if you're in an RV park or a mobile home park, but if you go out and you buy a few acres in the county and you put a house on wheels out there and you hook it up, and a neighbor complains, you could have a problem. Okay? Not supposed to be for permanent full-time housing. So with houses on wheels, you can get a 15-year note typically. I've heard of some doing 20, but the terms are really ugly. Okay? That,
And what are the terms, you know, it's typical rates?
hey, you're looking at 7 to 9%, 15 years, 20% down. Units with wheels have titles. Okay? And that's what they loan against, the title. Doesn't mean the unit can't disappear. That's the risk, right? So when you go to a modular on foundation, if it's approved, you can get 15 and 30-year mortgages. Okay? Again, over 400 square feet. For rentals and commercial, leasing is available. So let me explain that. There are banks that like product so well in this space that if you wanted to do a tiny home hotel or a tiny home wedding venue, they will either finance it or they will lease it to you. They will do an operating lease or they will do a capital lease. They'll do a stated buyout, so you have an amount to pay when the lease is over, or they'll do a dollar buyout at the end, okay? If you've got a good business plan and the land to put these units on, there's a way to get them financed, okay? Let's keep going. Oh, and there's me.